The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with the kind of laughter that echoes through bad decisions. Admiral Vrek of the Dominion fleet stood at the viewing platform, his 3 eyes watering with mirth as he zoomed in on the approaching human vessels. "Look at them," Vrek wheezed, slapping his primary appendage against the console. Are those actual combustion engines? By the Seven Suns, I haven't seen technology that primitive since my grandfather's museum visits. Commander Tholis, a serpentine Kasari with scales that shimmered between purple and green, slithered closer to the display. Her forked tongue flickered with amusement. "Sir, their largest vessel appears to be held together with welded plating. Actual, welded, plating. My hatchlings build more sophisticated toys in their second molt." The tactical display showed 6 human warships limping toward the neutral zone where the Dominion Armada waited. These weren't the sleek, plasma-edged nightmares of modern warfare. These were blocky, angular monstrosities that looked like someone had taken industrial scrap and hammered it into vaguely ship-shaped forms. Rust streaks decorated their hulls. Their weapons turrets rotated with visible mechanical gears. One ship, gods help them, had what appeared to be actual painted letters spelling out HMCS Defiant across its bow. "They call them museum pieces," said Lieutenant Gorsh, consulting his data tablet with barely contained giggles. "These ships were scheduled for decommissioning 70 cycles ago. The humans pulled them out of storage facilities and, get this, they actually volunteered to crew them." Vrek's laughter subsided into a predatory grin. How delightfully suicidal. "Intelligence reports?" 6 vessels total," Gorsh replied, his voice taking on the rehearsed tone of a formal briefing that couldn't quite mask his amusement. "Lead ship is the Defiant, followed by the Valkyrie, Phoenix, Revenant, Harbinger, and bringing up the rear, something they're calling the Redemption. Combined crew complement of approximately 4,000 humans. Their shields operate on outdated frequency modulation. Their weapons are kinetic projectiles and primitive missiles. Sir, our point defense systems will swat their ordnance like insects before they come within 10,000 kilometers. And they know they're facing the Dominion Third Fleet?" Vrek asked, his tone dripping with mock concern. "We broadcast our strength on all channels," Tholis confirmed. 47 capital ships, including the flagship Eternal Wrath. 112 support vessels. Full battle readiness. They acknowledged our transmission and, this is the best part, they responded with, "Message received. See you soon." The bridge crew erupted in laughter. Vrek settled into his command throne, a satisfied smirk playing across his face. This will be over before midday meal. Humanity has been a thorn in the Council's side for 3 generations, always refusing to bow, always demanding equality in chambers where they clearly don't belong. Today, we demonstrate what happens when primitives play at galactic politics. Ready all weapons. When they cross into firing range, I want a display that will be studied in military academies for centuries. "Sir," the communications officer's voice cut through the celebration, "the human fleet is broadcasting on an open channel, audio only." "Put it through," Vrek said, gesturing magnanimously. "Let's hear their surrender. Perhaps they've come to their senses." Static crackled across the bridge speakers, followed by a voice that was distinctly, unmistakably human. Female. Calm. Almost bored. "Dominion Fleet, this is Captain Elizabeth Vance of the Terran Heritage Squadron. We received your rather dramatic positioning. Very impressive, by the way. Must have taken your logistics team days to arrange everyone just so. We appreciate you waiting for us." Tholis's scales rippled with confusion. "Is she mocking us?" the human captain continued, her voice taking on a conversational tone that set Vrek's teeth on edge. "Now, we understand you've made certain proclamations about human territory, something about annexation, forced relocation. I have to admit, we weren't really listening to the full broadcast. The Council's diplomatic messages tend to run long, lots of flowery language about destiny and natural order and such. We get the gist, though. You want our colonies. You think we'll just hand them over?" "Cut transmission," Vrek snapped. "Sir, they're broadcasting on 70 different frequencies simultaneously," the communications officer stammered. "They're flooding every channel. I can't block it without shutting down our entire communications grid." Vance's voice carried on, unperturbed. "Here's the thing about these ships you're looking at. Yes, they're old. Yes, they've seen better days. The Defiant here. She fought in the Proxima Rebellion. Before that, she was part of the Colony Defense Network during the Expansion Wars. The Valkyrie? She held the line at Kepler Station when raiders thought they'd found easy pickings. Every single vessel in this squadron has a history. They've bled. They've burned. They've been through hell and back so many times that hell started charging them rent. Vrek leaned forward, his amusement curdling into something that tasted like the beginnings of uncertainty. Around the bridge, the laughter had died. Officers glanced at their screens, then at each other, then back at their screens. We pulled these ships out of retirement for a reason, Vance said, and now there was steel beneath the casual tone. Not because we don't have newer vessels, not because humanity is desperate or weak. We brought them here because we wanted you to understand something fundamental about our species. We don't forget, we don't discard, and we sure as hell don't quit. Range to target? Vrek barked. 50,000 kilometers and, closing, tactical responded. 30 seconds to optimal firing solution. These relics, as you've been calling them? Vance's voice took on an edge that could cut through hull plating. Let me tell you what they really are. They're promises kept. They're lessons learned. They're the accumulated knowledge of every battle humanity has fought since we crawled out of our gravity well and realized the universe wasn't empty. Every scar on these hulls tells a story. Every patch, every repair, every system that's been rebuilt from the ground up. That's human stubbornness made manifest. 20,000 kilometers, Tactical announced. Sir, should we fire? Vrek hesitated. Something was wrong. The human ships hadn't changed course, hadn't increased speed. They just kept coming, steady and sure, like they were out for a leisurely cruise instead of facing annihilation. We named this the Heritage Squadron, Vance continued, because these ships carry our heritage, not just our history, but our nature. You see us as primitives playing with outdated toys. We see ourselves as the species that turned the worst day of our lives into a lesson and then made sure we'd never need to learn it twice. 10,000 kilometers. Point defense systems acquiring targets. Their missile tubes are... Sir, the human ships are powering up, energy signatures spiking across all vessels. The tactical display exploded with new data. The blocky, primitive shapes of the human warships suddenly blazed with light. Hull plating that had seemed like simple armor split along invisible seams, revealing weapon ports by the dozens. The rust and wear on their exteriors began to glow, cherry red, then white hot, as if the ships themselves were coming alive. What in the void? Tholis whispered. Those aren't rust streaks, the sensor officer croaked. They're heat dispersal patterns. Those ships aren't old. They're cold. They've been running on minimal power to mask their true capabilities. The Defiance engines, which had been putting out a modest thrust signature consistent with ancient fusion drives, suddenly roared to life with the telltale frequency of military-grade antimatter reactors. The other 5 ships followed suit, their power outputs climbing from laughable to terrifying in the span of 3 seconds. "Shields up!" Vrek screamed. "All batteries, fire at will." But he was already too late. The human ships didn't dodge or weave. They simply accelerated, their new velocity reading, sending panicked alarms screaming across every station on the bridge. The Defiant's main guns, those primitive kinetic turrets, rotated with mechanical precision and fired. The rounds weren't projectiles. They were condensed matter shells wrapped in gravitational shielding, traveling at a significant fraction of light speed. They punched through the Eternal Wrath's forward shields like they weren't there. Hull breaches bloomed across 3 sections. Secondary explosions rippled through the flagship's portside. Return fire, return fire. Vrek clutched his command throne as the ship shuddered under the impact. The Dominion fleet opened up with everything they had. Plasma beams, particle cannons, missile swarms. Enough firepower to glass a planet. The targeting computers had never trained on opponents this aggressive. Modern warships danced at range, trading volleys while maintaining safe distances. The humans weren't dancing. They were charging, straight into the teeth of the Dominion's guns, and they were winning. The Valkyrie rolled to present her broadside, and what had looked like decorative paneling peeled away to reveal point defense clusters that lit up like 1,000 angry stars. Every missile the Dominion sent her way vanished in precisely calculated detonations. Not close calls. perfect intercepts. The Phoenix launched what sensors initially read as primitive warheads. Then those warheads split into submunitions. Those submunitions split again and again. A cloud of smart matter projectiles spread across the battlefield like a swarm, each one independently targeting Dominion ships with coordination that suggested a level of processing power that shouldn't fit in packages that small. "Sir, the Revenant just disappeared from sensors," someone shouted. "It didn't disappear," the sensor officer corrected, his voice high with panic. "It's using some kind of distortion field. I'm reading gravitational anomalies. They're bending light around the entire ship." A Dominion cruiser exploded without warning, its reactor breached by weapons fire from a direction where nothing visible existed. Captain Vance's voice cut through the chaos, still calm, still conversational, like she was discussing the weather. "You called us primitives. You looked at our ships and saw relics. You made the oldest mistake in warfare. You assumed that just because something looks simple, it is simple. These vessels were built during an age when humanity didn't have the luxury of elegant solutions. We built them tough. We built them mean. And over the decades, every time technology advanced, we didn't throw them away. We upgraded them. We refined them. We made them better." The Harbinger demonstrated exactly what she meant. The ship's hull split open like a flower blooming, revealing an interior packed with missile batteries that would have made a modern arsenal ship jealous. Tubes fired in perfect sequence, creating a geometric pattern of contrails that would have been beautiful if it weren't so terrifying. The missiles didn't aim for individual ships. They coordinated, creating overlapping fields of fire that forced Dominion vessels to choose between multiple catastrophic impacts or maneuvering into each other's firing solutions. 3 destroyers collided trying to evade. A cruiser took 6 direct hits while attempting to protect the flagship. The Eternal Wrath's shields, rated to withstand sustained bombardment from equivalent forces, buckled and failed under an assault doctrine that predated their design parameters by a century. "They're using pre-quantum targeting," Tholis realized. "Our countermeasures are designed for neural net prediction algorithms. These humans are calculating firing solutions with classical mathematics. Our jammers can't interfere with them because there's nothing sophisticated enough to jam." Vrek stared at the tactical display as his fleet, his beautiful, modern, superior fleet, came apart. The human ships were surrounded by Dominion vessels, outnumbered, outmassed, and they were carving through his forces like apex predators in a herd of prey animals. The Redemption, the last ship in the human formation, had barely fired a shot. She simply kept pace with her sisters, her weapons' ports glowing but silent, like a held breath waiting to be released. "Break off," Vrek commanded. "All ships, retreat to rally point Gamma. Emergency jump. Sir, we still have numerical superiority. We can overwhelm them if we just jump now." The Dominion fleet scattered, drives spinning up for faster-than-light escape. But they'd waited too long, pressed too close. The Phoenix had seeded the battlefield with too many surprises. Subspace inhibitors flickered to life, creating pockets of locked space that turned coordinated retreat into chaos. Captain Vance's final transmission came through crystal clear. "You can run. We won't stop you. But take this message back to your council. These ships, they're just 6 vessels from our reserve fleet. We have hundreds more, some even older, some much newer. All of them crewed by people who remember what it cost to earn our place among the stars. You wanted to test humanity's resolve? Congratulations. Consider yourselves educated." The Defiant's main guns spoke one last time, not aimed at the retreating ships, but fired past them into empty space, the rounds vanishing into the void. A demonstration, a promise. We could have killed you all, and we chose mercy this once. As the Dominion fleet limped away, Admiral Vrek sat in his damaged command throne and understood with perfect clarity that he'd just made a terrible mistake. One that would haunt military strategists for generations. The humans hadn't brought their old ships to prove they were strong. They'd brought them to prove they were smart. That they remembered. That underestimating humanity wasn't just dangerous, it was fatal. The council chamber on Velgrox Prime had never been designed for silence, but silence was exactly what filled it now. 300 representatives from across the galaxy sat in their designated sections, watching the holographic playback for the 7th time. Nobody spoke. Nobody dared. Counselor Prime Yethris, a towering Velkeen with skin like polished obsidian, finally raised one crystalline hand to pause the footage. The image froze on the Defiant, her hull glowing white-hot, weapons ports open, like the maw of some ancient predator. 7 days, Yethris said quietly. Admiral Vrek has been in medical stasis for 7 days. His ship limped back to dock with 63% casualties. 17 vessels from Third Fleet are combat ineffective. 9 were destroyed outright. This was supposed to be a simple enforcement action. The Kasari delegate, Representative Morn, shifted uncomfortably in her coiled seating. With respect, Counselor Prime, we cannot allow this incident to dictate policy. The humans fielded 6 ships. 6 against 47 capital vessels. The mathematics are clear. They simply had better intelligence about our defensive protocols than anticipated. Better intelligence? Yethris's voice cracked like breaking stone. Watch the footage again, Morn. Those ships didn't rely on intelligence. They relied on doctrine so old our databases classified it as historical curiosity. They beat us with tactics our great-grandparents would have recognized. From the human section, a lone figure stood. Captain Elizabeth Vance looked exactly as she had in the transmission, her grey uniform crisp, her expression professionally neutral. She'd been invited to the council as a courtesy, a chance for humanity to explain its actions before formal sanctions were discussed. Nobody had expected her to actually show up. Permission to address the council? Vance asked. Yethris gestured sharply. Granted. Though I'm curious what justification you could possibly offer for an unprovoked assault on Dominion forces. Vance smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. Unprovoked? Your fleet declared territorial annexation of 3 human colony worlds. You broadcast your intention to forcibly relocate approximately 12 million civilians. And you expected us to file a diplomatic protest and wait 6 months for committee review? Standard procedure. Would have resulted in our people being displaced or worse while bureaucrats argued about subcommittee composition, Vance finished. We've been members of this council for 38 years. In that time, we've watched enforcement actions, territorial disputes, and resource conflicts drag on for decades because nobody wants to make decisive choices. Well, humanity makes decisive choices. Morn's scales flushed deep purple. You call slaughter decisive? Those were trained soldiers following lawful orders. Lawful? Vance's voice could have etched steel. Your definition of lawful includes might, makes right, and possession is 9/10. That's not law. That's convenience dressed up in formal language. And yes, I call defending our territory decisive. You want slaughter? We had firing solutions on every single ship in that fleet. The Redemption alone carried enough ordnance to turn your flagship into component atoms. We let you retreat because we're not interested in genocide. We're interested in making absolutely certain you understand the cost of testing us. Threats? Yethris's voice rose. You stand here and threaten this council? No, Counselor. I'm here providing education, since apparently the demonstration wasn't clear enough. Vance activated her personal holo display, throwing schematics into the air above the assembly floor. These are the ships you've been calling relics. Let me give you the guided tour, since intelligence gathering seems to be a weak point for the Dominion. The schematic rotated, showing the Defiant in cross-section. This vessel was commissioned 68 years ago as a colony defense platform. Original armament was basic kinetic batteries and short-range missiles. 5 years into service, we upgraded her reactor. 10 years after that, we replaced her entire sensor suite. 15 years after that, new engines. 20 years after that, adaptive hull plating. We've replaced, upgraded, or enhanced 93% of her systems over her operational lifetime. The only original components are the frame and the name. She's had 7 different crews, each one learning from the last, each one adding to her operational doctrine. Another schematic appeared. The Valkyrie, then the Phoenix, then the others, each one showing layer after layer of modifications, upgrades, and enhancements. This is what you don't understand about humanity, Vance continued. We don't throw things away just because they're old. We improve them. We learn from them. These ships aren't museum pieces we dusted off in desperation. They're teaching platforms. Every officer in the Terran fleet spends rotation time on Heritage Squadron vessels. Not because we're nostalgic, but because these ships force you to understand fundamentals. You can't rely on automated systems compensating for sloppy tactics. You can't depend on superior technology doing the thinking for you. You have to be better, smarter, more precise. The council chamber buzzed with uncomfortable murmurs. Vance wasn't finished. You want to know why we won? It wasn't the ships, it was the humans inside them. Commander Marcus Webb on the Valkyrie served 18 years on modern vessels before volunteering for Heritage Squadron. He said, and I quote, "I wanted to remember how to actually fight instead of managing computers that fight for me." Lieutenant Commander Patricia Okonkwo ran tactical on the Phoenix. She holds advanced degrees in classical warfare, studied everything from ancient naval battles to early space combat. She chose those old missiles specifically because your countermeasures are designed for smart ordnance. Ours were dumb enough to be brilliant. Yethris's hand clenched into a fist. This proves nothing except that humanity remains dangerously unpredictable. Unpredictable? Vance laughed, sharp and bitter. No, Counselor. We're the most predictable species in this chamber. Push us, we push back. Threaten our people, we defend them. Attack our territory, we make you regret it. The problem isn't that we're unpredictable. The problem is that you've grown so accustomed to species that bend to threats, you forgot what it looks like when someone stands their ground. The Dominion had every right. The Dominion had nothing, Vance interrupted. Those colony worlds were settled under council-approved charters. Every legal requirement was met. But because we're relatively new, because our technology developed differently, because we don't fit neatly into your established power structures, you thought you could just take what you wanted. You thought wrong. Morn rose from her coiled position. So what now, Captain? You've humiliated a council member fleet. You've demonstrated that outdated vessels can defeat modern ones under specific circumstances. Do you expect us to simply accept this precedent? To allow any species to attack council forces whenever they feel threatened? Vance met her gaze steadily. I expect you to remember that laws apply to everyone, or they apply to no one. The Dominion violated our territorial sovereignty. We responded proportionally and with restraint. If you want to punish us for defending ourselves, go ahead and try. But understand this, the Heritage Squadron represents less than 2% of Terran military capability. Those 6 ships? We have 147 more in reserve, and every single one of them has a crew that just watched the footage you've been analyzing. They've seen what we accomplished. They're eager to prove they can do better. The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted in 36 languages. Security personnel moved toward the exits, expecting violence. Yethris pounded the council gavel, calling for order that nobody wanted to provide. In the chaos, a small, quiet voice cut through the noise. Perhaps we should hear them out. Everyone turned. The speaker was Ambassador Tirnik of the Plenary Collective, a species so diplomatically focused that they rarely spoke in council sessions at all. When they did, people listened. Captain Vance, Tirnik continued, his translucent form pulsing gently. You've made your point effectively, if dramatically. But surely you understand that the Council cannot function if every territorial dispute is resolved through military action. What you're proposing is chaos. Vance's expression softened slightly. Ambassador, I'm not proposing anything. I'm observing reality. This Council has maintained order through implicit threat for 3 centuries. Larger, more advanced species enforce their will on smaller ones. It's dressed up as peacekeeping and diplomatic pressure, but the foundation is always the same. Do what we say or face consequences. Humanity just demonstrated that consequences run both ways. So you advocate for might makes, right? Morn challenged. No, I advocate for actual rule of law. The Dominion broke it. We enforced it. If the Council had functioning enforcement mechanisms that applied equally to all members, we wouldn't have needed to defend to ourselves. But you don't. You have enforcement mechanisms that protect the powerful and constrain the weak. We're here to inform you that humanity is no longer weak enough to constrain. Yethris rose to full height, his obsidian skin reflecting the chamber lights. You walk a dangerous path, Captain. You speak of law while threatening force. You claim victimhood while demonstrating overwhelming capability. The Council will not forget this day. Good, Vance said simply. That's the point. We don't want you to forget. We want every species in this chamber to remember that humanity honors treaties, respects sovereignty, and will go to extraordinary lengths to resolve conflicts peacefully. But we also want you to remember that when push comes to shove, when talk fails and threats emerge, we will not fold. We will not flee. We will fight with everything we have, using every advantage we can create, and we will win. She deactivated her holo display and straightened her uniform. The Heritage Squadron is returning to patrol routes around our territory. We'll be conducting regular exercises using the same vessels and tactics you witnessed. Consider it an open invitation. If anyone else wants to test whether those results were a fluke, we'll be happy to provide additional demonstrations. You cannot threaten the entire council, someone shouted from the back sections. Vance turned slowly, scanning the assembled delegates. I'm not threatening anyone. I'm establishing deterrence. There's a difference. Threats are about intimidation. Deterrence is about clarity. You now know exactly what happens if you violate our territory. You know the cost. You know our capability. The choice of whether to pay that cost is entirely yours. Tyrnik pulsed thoughtfully. And if the Council decides that humanity's actions warrant sanctions, trade embargoes, diplomatic isolation, then we'll adapt, Vance said. We've been adapting for our entire existence as a spacefaring species. We adapted to hostile environments. We adapted to first contact with species far more advanced than us. We adapted to council politics that consistently favored established powers. We're very good at adapting, Ambassador. It's kind of our thing. Yethris moved to speak, but Tyrnik raised a translucent appendage. If I may, Councillor Prime? I believe the captain has earned the opportunity to finish her statement without interruption. Vance nodded gratefully. I have one more thing to share, and then I'll leave you to your deliberations. You've been analyzing footage of 6 ships defeating a numerically superior force. You've been trying to understand how we did it, looking for some technological secret or tactical innovation you can counter. You're asking the wrong questions. She pulled up one final image. Not a ship schematic or battle map, but a photograph. It showed the crew of the Defiant, 270 humans of every conceivable appearance, standing together in their hangar bay. Some smiled, some looked tired, all looked determined. This is why we won, Vance said softly. Every person in this picture volunteered for Heritage Squadron. They gave up postings on newer, safer vessels. They chose to crew ships that require constant maintenance, that demand manual operation of systems other fleets automated decades ago. They made that choice because they believe in something bigger than themselves. They believe that humanity's place in the galaxy isn't given, it's earned. That our colonies aren't just territory on a map, they're homes filled with people who trusted us to protect them. The chamber had gone quiet again, but this time the silence felt different, contemplative rather than shocked. You want to understand humanity, Vance continued. Understand this. We remember where we came from. We remember the struggles that got us here. And we teach every generation that nothing worth having comes easy. Those old ships aren't relics, they're reminders. Every scratch on their hulls is a lesson learned. Every system we've upgraded is a problem we solved. Every battle they've fought is a story we tell ourselves about who we are and who we choose to be. She looked directly at Yethris. The Dominion wanted to take our colonies because they thought we wouldn't fight for them effectively. They saw our attachment to old vessels as weakness. They were wrong. Our attachment to those ships comes from the same place as our attachment to our people. We don't abandon what matters. We don't discard what has value. We don't quit when things get difficult. That's not weakness, Counselor. That's the strongest foundation a species can build. Vance moved toward the exit, then paused. The Council has a choice now. You can treat this as an aberration, a temporary setback in the natural order of things. You can try to isolate or punish humanity for daring to defend itself. Or you can recognize that the galaxy is changing, that newer species are developing capabilities you didn't anticipate, and that your enforcement mechanisms need to reflect actual justice rather than convenient power dynamics. Whatever you decide, humanity will be fine. We've survived worse than diplomatic sanctions. We'll survive whatever comes next. She saluted, a crisp military gesture that somehow conveyed respect without submission, and walked out of the council chamber. The doors sealed behind her with a hiss of pressurized atmosphere. For a long moment nobody moved. Then Tyrnik pulsed softly. Well, that was illuminating. That was a declaration of independence, Morn hissed. She basically told us the Council's authority extends only as far as humanity chooses to recognize it. Yes, Yethris said slowly. She did. The question is whether she's right. Ambassador Tyrnik, your people have the longest historical records in the Council. Have we seen this pattern before? Tyrnik's form shifted through several colors before settling on a thoughtful amber. Twice. Once with the Velkeen, approximately 400 years before Council formation, once with the Kasari during the Integration Wars. Both times, established powers attempted to force emerging species into predetermined roles. Both times, the emerging species refused. Both times, significant conflict resulted until treaties were established, recognizing mutual sovereignty. And you're suggesting we're witnessing the same pattern with humanity? Yethris asked. I'm suggesting, Tyrnik said carefully, that Captain Vance made several valid points beneath the bravado. Our enforcement mechanisms do favor established members. Territorial disputes do drag on indefinitely when the aggressed party lacks military parity. And perhaps most importantly, we have grown accustomed to compliance based on implied threat rather than genuine cooperation based on mutual benefit. Morn's scales flickered through angry reds and purples. So we simply accept this? Allow them to dictate terms through violence? They dictated nothing, Tyrnik observed. They defended their territory using force proportional to the threat, then withdrew. They didn't press their advantage, didn't demand concessions, didn't attempt to seize Dominion territory in retaliation. They established a defensive position and invited dialogue. That's remarkably restrained for a species you're characterizing as dangerously aggressive. Yethris sat back down heavily. I need to review the territorial charter for those colony worlds. If humanity's claims are legitimate under existing treaties. They are, Tyrnik confirmed. I checked before this session. Every legal requirement was met. The Dominion's annexation proclamation had no standing under Council law. They were essentially attempting a land grab, gambling that humanity would back down rather than fight. And we all watched that gamble fail spectacularly, Yethris muttered. He looked around the chamber at the assembled delegates, seeing concern, fear, and in some cases, carefully hidden satisfaction. The established power structure was being challenged, and not everyone was unhappy about it. Motion, Yethris said formally. I propose the Council commission a full review of enforcement protocols and territorial dispute resolution mechanisms, with specific focus on ensuring equal application regardless of species membership duration or military capability. Furthermore, I propose we formally acknowledge humanity's right to self-defense in the recent engagement and issue a censure to Dominion forces for initiating unprovoked territorial aggression. All in favor? The vote wasn't unanimous. Several delegations abstained. A few voted against, but the majority, swayed by Tyrnik's historical perspective and the undeniable legal facts, voted in favor. Somewhere in deep space, the Heritage Squadron maintained its patrol route. 6 old ships, their crews rotating through maintenance shifts and training exercises, watching the borders of human territory with vigilance earned through hard experience. On the Defiance Bridge, Commander Marcus Webb reviewed the latest intelligence reports and allowed himself a small smile. The Council had blinked. Not much, but enough. Sir, incoming transmission from Earth Fleet Command, his communications officer announced. Webb accepted the connection. Admiral Victoria Torres appeared on screen, her expression serious. Commander, I trust you've seen the Council vote? Yes, Admiral. Looks like Captain Vance made an impression. She always does. Listen, Command is pleased with Heritage Squadron's performance, but we're concerned about escalation. The Dominion is humiliated. Other species are watching to see if they can replicate your tactics. This could get complicated. Webb nodded. Permission to speak freely, Admiral. Always, Marcus. Good, because here's the thing, it should be complicated. The Council got comfortable with a power structure that only works if everyone agrees to participate. Humanity just proved we don't have to agree. Other species will learn the same lesson. The galaxy is about to get a lot more interesting, and frankly, I think that's healthy. Complacency breeds injustice. A little chaos breeds adaptation. Torres laughed. You've been spending too much time with those old ships. Starting to sound like a philosopher. These old ships have had time to develop wisdom, Admiral. That's what happens when you don't throw things away just because they're not shiny anymore. You learn to appreciate depth over appearance. Well, maintain your patrol routes and your wisdom. Command will keep you updated on diplomatic developments. Torres out. The connection closed. Webb leaned back in his chair, looking around the bridge that had been upgraded, modified, and improved countless times over the decades. He thought about all the crews who'd sat in this same chair, faced their own challenges, made their own contributions to the ship's legacy. Captain Vance was right. These weren't relics. They were promises kept. Every time humanity chose to upgrade rather than replace, to maintain rather than discard, they were making a statement about values, about what mattered, about who they were. The Dominion had seen old ships and assumed weakness. They'd confused age with obsolescence, history with irrelevance. They'd forgotten that sometimes the oldest tools are the best tools, refined through generations of use, perfected through countless iterations of improvement. They wouldn't forget again. None of them would. The galaxy had just learned a very old human truth. Don't judge a book by its cover, or in this case, don't judge a warship by its hull plating, because underneath that weathered exterior beats the accumulated knowledge of everyone who came before, waiting patiently for the moment someone needs a reminder about respecting boundaries, honoring treaties, and the price of underestimating determination. The Heritage Squadron sailed on, 6 ships carrying the weight of human history and the promise of human future, old vessels with new lessons for anyone foolish enough to test them. And somewhere, in a medical facility on a Dominion world, Admiral Vrek finally regained consciousness and asked what happened. When they told him, when they showed him the footage, he simply closed his eyes and whispered one word: humans. It carried the weight of revelation, of understanding that comes too late, of respect earned through the hardest possible lesson. The galaxy listened, the galaxy learned, and the galaxy adjusted, because that's what you do when someone reminds you that respect isn't given, it's earned, and humanity had just made one hell of a down payment.